Captured in 1945, this haunting photo shows a Japanese woman standing alone in the scorched ruins of Tokyo, staring into the distance with vacant eyes. Following the US firebombing raids, entire neighborhoods were reduced to ashes. Nearly 100,000 civilians died in one night during Operation Meeting House. Her posture is rigid, still reflecting not just personal loss, but the collective trauma of a city erased overnight. Seen in this photo from the 1920s, a group of Indian women are shackled together during a non-violent protest against British colonial rule. Dressed in simple saris, they stand defiantly despite the humiliation. These women, some still teenagers, were imprisoned without charge for taking part in the Swadeshi movement. Their resilience in the face of oppression became a quiet force that helped dismantle the British Empire. This disturbing image from the Pacific War shows a grinning US soldier holding the severed head of a Japanese combatant. Taken in 1943 and later banned by the US government, the photo was originally used as a battlefield trophy. Such acts, though rare, were covered up to maintain the American image of moral superiority. The grotesque reality of war, captured in a moment never meant for public eyes. Captured in Berlin in 1931, this image shows disabled German veterans from World War I begging in the freezing streets. Wearing tattered uniforms and missing limbs, they huddle near train stations with bowls in their laps. The Weimar Republic offered little support to these men, many of whom had been national heroes just a decade earlier. Their abandonment fed the bitterness that would help fuel Hitler's rise to power. This photo from 1957 shows a 15-year-old girl, Elizabeth Eckford, walking stoically through an enraged white mob outside Little Rock Central High School. Part of the Little Rock Nine, she was one of the first black students to integrate an all-white public school in Arkansas. No escort, no allies, only hate-filled faces and shouted slurs. This iconic image of isolation and courage sparked federal intervention. This rare 1890 photo was taken just after the Wounded Knee massacre in South Dakota. It shows a Lakota child lying still in the snow, his small body frozen where US soldiers left it. Nearly 300 Native Americans were killed, many of them unarmed women and children. The US government framed it as a battle, but this photo told the real story, one of extermination and erasure. Seen in this 1932 photo from Ukraine, a skeletal woman clutches a bundle that was once a child, standing outside a crumbling hut. The Holodomor famine, engineered by Stalin's regime, killed millions. Entire villages were erased from the map due to forced grain requisition. Soviet authorities denied the famine's existence and banned all documentation of its horrors. Captured in Cambodia in 1970, this image shows a boy no older than 10 standing in front of a gaping mass grave. The Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, conducted purges that killed nearly 2 million people. This photo, smuggled out by a journalist, revealed the horror of state-run genocide. The child's gaze, distant, unreadable, remains one of the last links to thousands of vanished lives. This rare image from Auschwitz in 1944 shows a group of Jewish women moments before entering the gas chambers. Their expressions range from confusion to quiet dread, taken by a Nazi guard for documentation. The photo was never meant to leave the camp. It's one of the few visual records showing victims immediately before extermination. In this 1963 photo taken in Saigon, Buddhist monk Thi Quyen, he self-immolated in protest of the South Vietnamese regime's violent persecution of Buddhists. Onlookers watched in silence as he never moved or cried out. The image shocked the world and was censored in many countries due to its graphic power. Taken during the Spanish Civil War in 1936, this photo shows a mother clinging to her lifeless child amid the rubble of a bombing raid in Guernica. Fascist warplanes targeted civilians in a precursor to World War II tactics. The grief in her face echoed across a continent on the brink of collapse. Pablo Picasso's famous painting would later immortalize this massacre, but this image captured its rawest moment. Seen in this grim 1947 photo from Delhi, piles of corpses line the road as vultures circle above. Following India's partition, a wave of communal violence swept across the newly drawn borders. Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs were caught in massacres that killed over 1 million. The photo was censored to prevent further unrest, but its silence told a deeper story. This image, taken in the Congo Free State around 1904, shows a man named Sala staring at the severed hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter. Belgian tos, Rue, Phaelintos, Bupotas by mutilating children. The image, sent abroad by missionaries, helped expose King Leopold's brutal regime. It remains one of the most powerful photos ever taken of colonial exploitation. Taken in 1968 during the Vietnam War, this photo shows South Vietnamese General Nguyen Ngoc lone executing a handcuffed Viet Cong suspect in the street. Captured by photojournalist Eddie Adams, the image won a Pulitzer Prize. Government tried to limit its distribution due to its impact on public opinion. A single trigger pull froze the war's moral ambiguity in time. Captured in 1938, Germany, this disturbing photo shows Roma children lined up for Nazi medical experiments. Considered racially inferior, they were subjected to painful procedures without anesthesia. Most would later be exterminated in gas chambers. Only fragments of their stories survive through photos like this one. Seen in this 1955 image from Mississippi, the mutilated body of Emmett Till lies in an open casket. Just 14 years old, he was lynched for allegedly whistling at a white woman. His mother, Mamie Till Mobley, insisted on an open casket to show the world what had been done to her son. The photo was initially banned from many newspapers, but ignited the early civil rights movement. This 1942 photo shows Japanese-American families waiting with luggage at a bus stop in California. Following Executive Order 9066, over 120,000 people, many of them US citizens, were sent to internment camps. Stripped of property and dignity, their only crime was ancestry. The government restricted media access to conceal the scale of the injustice. Taken in Ukraine during 1941, this chilling photo shows Jewish men forced to dig their own graves outside a small village. Within minutes, they would be executed by Nazi Einsatzgruppen. These mobile killing units murdered over 1 million Jews before death camps were even built. Few images survived. This is one of them, captured in Tehran in 1980. This photograph shows a woman blindfolded and moments from execution by firing squad. Her crime, protesting the new Islamic regime. Trials often lasted minutes and sentences were immediate. The image was smuggled out of Iran and used by human rights organizations as evidence of state violence. This photo from 1911 shows young immigrant girls posing happily outside the Triangle Shirtwaist factory in New York. Just weeks later, a fire trapped them inside due to locked doors, killing 146 workers. Most were teenage girls who jumped to their deaths to escape the flames. The tragedy led to major labor reforms, but these smiling faces serve as a haunting prelude. Taken in 1933, this photo captures Nazi supporters throwing books into a bonfire in Berlin. Works by Jewish, pacifist, and foreign authors were deemed dangerous to German culture. Students cheered as flames consumed generations of thought. The image, originally used as propaganda, now serves as a chilling reminder of intellectual repression. Captured in 1959 during China's Great Leap Forward, this rare image shows a mother feeding grass to her children. Millions starved due to failed agricultural policies and government denial. Any mention of famine was banned, and cameras were forbidden in many areas. This photo only survived because it was hidden for decades. Seen in this image from 1945, a young German girl walks through the corpses of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, just days after liberation. British troops arrived to find thousands dead from starvation and typhus. The girl's face, hollow and expressionless, became a symbol of innocence destroyed. Minute Set, disturbing publication of post-war period. Taken in 1910 in the Peruvian Amazon, this photo shows an indigenous man chained to a post, forced to labor for the rubber trade. Western companies operated with impunity, using brutality to maximize profit. Children were taken as hostages, and entire communities were wiped out. This image, captured by a rare whistleblower, is one of few visual records of that exploitation. Captured in 1955, during the Algerian War of Independence, this photo shows French paratroopers dragging a blindfolded Algerian man from his home in Algiers. Accused of aiding rebels, he would likely face torture or execution without trial. The French government denied the use of torture, but photos like this, smuggled out by journalists, told another story. Decades later, official acknowledgement would still be met with controversy. Taken in 1937 in Nanjing, China, this chilling image shows Chinese civilians herded together by Japanese soldiers. Moments after this photo was taken, the group was executed and dumped into a mass grave. Known as the Nanjing Massacre, an estimated 300,000 people were murdered over several weeks. The brutality was so immense that even some Japanese officers reportedly broke down. This photo from 1986 shows firefighter Vasily Ignatenko on the roof of Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. Wearing minimal protection, he was exposed to lethal radiation in under a minute. He died in agony weeks later, along with dozens of others. The Soviet government initially denied the disaster, and this image was banned from Soviet newspapers for years. Captured in Manila in 1946, this image shows Allied troops standing beside a mass grave uncovered after the Japanese retreat. During their occupation, Japanese forces massacred over 100,000 Filipino civilians. The Battle of Manila left entire districts in ruins. For years, these atrocities received little attention outside the Philippines. Seen in this photo from 1929 Chicago, detectives examine the aftermath of the St. Valentine's Day massacre. 7 men were lined up against a garage wall and executed with Tommy guns, the result of a gangland war between Al Capone and his rivals. Police corruption allowed many suspects to walk free. Newspapers blurred the most graphic elements to prevent public outrage. This 1950s photo from Johannesburg, South Africa, shows a black child in tattered clothes watching white children play behind a fence labeled "Whites Only." The stark separation of race under apartheid was enforced by law. This child, too young to understand policy, was already shaped by it. The photo was banned from South African media to maintain illusions of order. Taken in the Warsaw Ghetto in 1943, this photo shows a young boy with his hands raised as Nazi soldiers point rifles at civilians. The boy was among thousands rounded up for deportation to death camps. His expression, part terror, part confusion, made this image one of the most recognizable symbols of the Holocaust. He was never seen again. Captured in Dhaka in 1971, this photo shows bodies piled beside a university building following a mass execution by Pakistani forces. Intellectuals and students were specifically targeted during Bangladesh's War of Independence. Many were blindfolded and shot in groups. For years, survivors feared sharing these photos due to the threat of political retaliation. Seen in this image from 1942, Serbia, a group of emaciated children stare blankly from inside a Nazi camp. Deemed racially impure, these Serbian and Roma children were starved, beaten, and experimented on. Few lived to see liberation. This photo, taken secretly by a sympathetic guard, was smuggled out as proof of Nazi atrocities. Captured in the 1930s Soviet Union, this photo shows a procession of prisoners chained together, marching toward a Siberian gulag. Many were sentenced for mere political dissent or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Survival rates were low due to forced labor, exposure, and starvation. The Soviet government denied these camps existed until after Stalin's death. Taken during the 1953 coup in Iran, this photo shows protesters clashing with police near the parliament building. The CIA-backed operation overthrew Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after he nationalized Iran's oil industry. In the chaos, hundreds were killed or imprisoned. Photos of the coup were destroyed or classified to protect Western interests. Seen in this 1971 photo from Belfast, Northern Ireland, British troops storm a Catholic home while children watch from a stairwell. The family was suspected of harboring IRA members. The Troubles would claim thousands of lives over the next 3 decades. This photo, showing both fear and innocence, was pulled from many British publications to avoid inflaming tensions. This photo from 1915 shows Armenian men bound and marched into the desert by Ottoman guards. Stripped of food and water, most would die from exhaustion or execution. Over 1 million Armenians were killed in what many historians classify as genocide. The Turkish government continues to dispute the terminology and responsibility, making this photo both historical evidence and political flashpoint. Captured in Beijing in 1989, this iconic image shows an anonymous man standing alone before a line of tanks in Tiananmen Square. After a brutal military crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators, the square was littered with bodies. To this day, Chinese state media censors all references to the event. The man's identity remains unknown, but his defiance lives on globally. Taken in 1942 France, this photo shows terrified Jewish children clinging to their mothers as Nazi collaborators separate families for deportation. Many of the children were sent to Auschwitz, never to return. French officials long suppressed their role in the roundup. The photo was eventually released to aid post-war reconciliation efforts. Seen in this 1967 photo from Detroit, fires rage behind a line of National Guard tanks during one of the deadliest race riots in US history. The uprising was sparked by police brutality and decades of systemic racism. Over 40 people died and thousands of buildings were destroyed. Government officials limited the release of graphic photos to maintain calm. Captured in 1935, Ethiopia, this image shows an Italian soldier standing over a burning village during Mussolini's invasion. Mustard gas and chemical weapons were used on civilians. The League of Nations condemned the act, but took no real action. Italy censored photographs that revealed the brutal truth of its colonial ambitions. Taken in 1944 Hungary, this photo shows a line of Jewish men stripped naked in winter, moments before execution by Nazi troops. These killings occurred even as the war neared its end. The goal was extermination, not strategy. Very few images of these late-war atrocities exist. This photo from 1956 shows a Hungarian teenager being dragged by Soviet soldiers during the crushing of the Hungarian uprising. Demanding independence from Moscow, citizens staged a revolt that was swiftly and brutally suppressed. Thousands were killed, and tens of thousands fled as refugees. The photo was banned in Eastern Bloc countries for decades. Seen in this 1930 image from Alabama, a young black man lies chained in a cotton field under guard. Though slavery was abolished, convict leasing allowed prisons to rent out inmates, often arrested on minor or false charges, as forced labor. This photo exposes a system that was slavery in all but name. It remained legal in various forms well into the 20th century. Taken during the 1960 Sharpeville massacre in South Africa, this photo shows bodies of peaceful protesters gunned down by apartheid police. 69 people were killed, many shot in the back as they fled. The protest was against passing laws requiring black South Africans to carry permits. The photo was banned by the South African press to avoid international backlash. Captured in 1947 Palestine, this photo shows Jewish refugees aboard the Exodus 1947 ship being forcibly returned to Europe by British soldiers. Survivors of the Holocaust were trying to reach the future state of Israel. The ship was blocked under British immigration policies, sparking global outrage. The photo challenged Western narratives about post-war justice. Seen in this 1930s image from Germany, a young disabled boy sits in a hospital slated for Nazi euthanasia programs. Children with mental or physical disabilities were labeled unfit and secretly killed. Known as Akchum T4, this program predated the Holocaust and laid the groundwork for genocide. Very few photographs of victims were ever allowed to surface. This final photo shows a wounded nurse in a makeshift hospital in 1941 Leningrad during the Nazi siege. Starvation and freezing temperatures killed over 1 million civilians. She continues working, bloodied but resolute, surrounded by collapsed walls and wounded bodies. Soviet authorities censored such images to maintain morale, but this one survived in a soldier's private archive. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.